Okay, these are some graphs which suggest that overall world population was growing at the rate of 2% in 1960s, and it has declined since then to about 1% in overall the world. Why it has happened? Because as the society modernizes, if people become advanced, they get educated, there's industrial growth. If the society modernizes, then first it's the death and what is known as mortality. It starts declining, and then eventually it's followed by the decline in fertility. Now, traditionally it's much easier for mortality to decline against fertility because there's a gap between the two. And if you look at historically anywhere, there could be, there are different stages depending on which country you're talking about. There are 4 stages, there are 5 stages, there could be 3 stages also. Okay. Now the 4 stages, it looks like it's a pre-industrial society. What it means that the growth rate is almost 0. The number of deaths and number of births, or number of births and deaths are almost equal to each other. And then what happens, a stage comes as the transition starts, when death rate starts declining, when improvements are made, then the death rates start declining very sharply. And so much so that it reaches a post-industrial stage, that is European countries, where death rate goes down very quickly, and it takes a while to birth rate to decline, because people have to adapt. They have to understand that children are not going to die that quickly. Because if I have 4 children, then all of them are going to survive. Earlier, the issue was that if I have 10 children, so maybe 2 would survive. Okay? Because infant mortality rate in the past was very, very extremely high. Maybe majority of people, kids won't reach their first birthday. That is infant mortality. The period of lag between the decline in fertility and mortality, that is when the population explosion occurs. Okay? And the population explosion occurs in the way that there are too many people. Wherever they are, they start either fighting with each other, or there's a natural disaster. What Malthus had said, that if there is no positive check, if the society or the people are unable to reduce their fertility, then there would be natural disaster, there would be hunger, there would be famine, there would be wars, and people would die. So eventually the nature comes and it intervenes. Or the other way they can do, that they can go elsewhere. They can migrate to other place. It happened in Europe, when Europe was, they started declining when they had the industrialization in Europe, in England and other places in Europe. Then death rate started declining in 18th century, 17th century actually, 17th, 18th century. So what do? There are too many people in Europe. So they started colonizing other countries. They went and discovered another continent in Western Hemisphere. They went and colonized, they came and colonized India. They colonized all over Africa. They colonized most of the Asian countries. They went up to Australia. So they discovered the entire world. They went and settled there. So excessive population of Europe was able to go elsewhere. They also looked for more raw material. They wanted to, they could do that. But now that migration from one country to another country has virtually stopped. So if the country is growing very fast, what do? They internally distribute their population. The more babies are born, the population growth rate in the rural areas is very high, in Pakistan, for example. So they start going to the cities. So that leads to the growth of cities. There are many people who come to the city, and the city of Karachi, which had only 2 million people in 1960, 61, it has grown into about 18 million people now. City of Lahore, which was hardly not even 1 million in 1960, at 500,000, now it has become 10 million. So, and that's true for any city you look at in the country. So that's a very crucial period of in between. Now the stages are also different, depend, as I said, from country to country. Some countries could go into different, they take a while, they take longer, they take shorter. For example, this is Pakistan, where if you look at the growth rate of Pakistan, it has gone up, or sorry, any developing country, but it's actually data is from Pakistan. And if you look at the more developed countries, it has gone down, the growth rate from 1.8 to 8% in Europe in 1950. Now it is 0.1%. So what it means, a country like most of the European countries are going to double their population how many years? 700 years, 70 divided by 0.1. And most of the developing countries, they are, because the growth rate is still 1.8 in 2000, and they will take about close to 37, 38 years, 40 years to double. So that's the difference, So most of the, if you look at population, most of the countries are, and this is something I already talked about, most of the countries are, population is growing, and some parts of Asia. Europe is almost stagnant. The growth rate of 0.1% is almost close to 0. Gigi.
So can I ask a question?
Please.
I am allowed to ask a question during lecture?
There are two ways to handle it. If it's very crucial, then do, because I may have your answer later. Achha, this time you ask the question, I'll see it.
I was just thinking if the Pakistan's growth rate is 1.8.
No, it's higher. About 1.92%.
Then how come the population of Pakistan is increasing? We are not having so much health services as compared to the other people around.
No, if 2% growth rate, then why it's increasing?
Why we are saying they decline?
No, it has come down, yes, from 3% to 2%.
It's on the decline as compared to 1960s.
Right.
Right? We haven't developed any healthcare system. Still, we are in a very infancy stage. We haven't had anything.
That would be answered in the last lecture when I talk about mortality.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your questions. This shows a lot of interest, and that was a very good question. Can we have all the questions in the end? Because
This is what I asked him.
Because we actually
Very
yes.
first.
Chalo. Okay, chalo. Okay, fine. Okay, now I understood, because I know that there's an answer to your question is there. That's what I said, if there's something. Okay, now if you look at the transition, the demographic transition, as I said, that it has occurred at a different pace in different countries. So there could be some countries could achieve it in 3 stages, some countries could achieve it in 5 stages. Here are 2 examples. One is Sweden. It has taken Sweden pretty long time to achieve, to go through the demographic transition. Sweden is perhaps the only country which has kept data for many, many centuries of births and deaths. And so you can see that earlier, birth and death rate, as a matter of fact, were fluctuating in the beginning, and then death rate declined to almost by 2010, it's 10 per thousand, and birth rate, it took a while to decline. So it is a long history between 1825 to 1925. It took 100 years. But then birth rate, as a matter of fact, almost, started, it was the same, 1800 to 2000. So it took 200 years in Sweden to reach that stage. So it could be different, it took five different stages. And then if you look at Mexico, it's pretty fast. It took only 1925 to 2000. And if you look at China, it's even faster. It only started declining, after the revolution. First, death started declining, and in 1970s, the births started declining. So China did it in 50 years. Okay, so and Iran also did it in 50 years. So there is no fixed stages. It could vary between 3 to 5. Okay. That's answer to your question you raised. Okay. Now, from what I mentioned, that most of the growth, on the basis of what we have, the growth rate, you can also do the modeling, some projection, which I'm just coming to a little later, that, for example, Europe's share currently is 10% in the world population, is going to decline in next 100 years to 6%. And Africa is going to almost double from 13% to 22%, because most of the growth is going to take in developing countries, and particularly Africa. Now, how do you know that this is going to be? How do you predict? That's done through what we call basic demographic equation. The basic demographic equation is very simple. Population time t plus 1 is any time in future. If you want to know that how many people are going to live in a country in 10 years from now or 20 years from now, then you need to know how many people are there, how many births are occurring, and minus how many deaths. That means that is known as natural increase. So how many people were added to the population through natural process, births minus deaths, and how many people were added or subtracted due to migration. So if you know that, then you can determine that, okay, that many. Now, most of the countries in the world, they don't have this kind of record. Some advanced countries do, European countries do, Sweden does, even China does. But most of the countries in the world, they don't have this